and welcome to Day Home Divas. I'm Joanne.
I'm Cash.
And I'm Sophia.
In this episode, we're talking about children and speech with speech pathologist Nicole McKeller. So, welcome to the podcast, Nicole.
Thank you for inviting me over, Joanne and crew.
Okay, so what does a typical day look like for you as a speech language pathologist?
So, speech language pathology is actually a pretty broad field, but I do think most of us work with children. So, for me personally, my days are split between working at a school board and working privately. So, right now, I'm kind of on vacation from the school board, but I'm taking private clients. So, what that looks like, I see children anywhere from, I want to say my youngest client right now is like 2 to 3 years old. And then I'm seeing up until children who are probably like junior high school as well. So it's quite
Okay.
a broad range of
Yeah,
students that I see. We have different kinds of services. So the classic that people would know is kind of just like that typical one-on-one therapy, sometimes in a clinic. I've also done it in the school, in a class, or sorry, in a daycare setting and at home as well. Yeah, so right now I do have also some groups. So more for elementary students. So I run like reading and literacy groups as well. So I know you had questions about reading and writing for later on. So I think we
yeah,
can talk more about that. But yeah, I see children who have speech difficulties, reading difficulties, writing difficulties, and also the other complex communication needs like children with autism. And we all know like that's a broad spectrum, right? So like
right.
there's people who are non-speaking, then there's also people who have, like have all of these abilities as well that we want to kind of help them to reach their full potential. So I'm kind of all over the place.
Perfect.
Some SLPs tend to specialize. Like at the school setting, I do more complex communicators. So I help with like elementary and high school students use their device. So I don't know if you've seen any of those before. So like children who use augmentative alternative communication or like a tablet kind of thing with
Oh, okay.
buttons that you press. So
Right.
that's the kind of, I guess, like area of specialization that I have when I work at the schools. But yeah, like literacy, like language as it relates to literacy is also something that
Right.
I'm very interested in. Yeah.
Awesome.
What are the most common speech or language issues you treat?
I want to say so. I think the most straightforward out of all of my caseload, and many SLPs might agree to this, is our speech sound kiddos. So these are children who have difficulties just pronouncing different speech sounds. And actually, because of maybe just the population that I'm seeing, I don't see much of those children. And in the schools too, it depends which school board you're at, because I think not a lot of school boards do speech sounds. They
Right.
mostly focus on like language. So I see children with language disorders or overall like communication disorders. And I was just like looking at my caseload as well. And I think most of the students that I see right now have either like persisting language disorders that co-occur with like reading difficulties. And then the other part would be more children who are on the spectrum as well. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so you're specific to special needs, so not like English as a second language or anything like that.
I think that's something that I actually see as well. So there's not a lot of SLPs actually who speak another language who have like kind of that special interest with the multilingual population. But because I have kind of that background, I speak Tagalog, and I know that a lot of SLPs always say like, oh, I have this like Filipino family or whatever. I see them like even in Edmonton, there's just so many families coming from diverse backgrounds. So I think
Yeah.
that's quite inevitable. So I do have them on my caseload as well. And I think when I see these families, it's always very important to be, what do you call this? trained in cultural competencies and,
Right.
acknowledge like cultural differences, that kind of thing. And even helping families be educated in terms of using their languages at home. We can talk more about that as well, but I think it's very interesting, like seeing what we were taught in school and how I kind of carry my practice versus what common knowledge is in terms of bilingualism or use of the home language at home.
Right.
So, yeah.
So how do you assess speech and language delays or disorders?
I think it varies depending on the age. I want to say that if I'm working with younger student or younger children, anywhere from like toddler to like preschool age kind of thing, it would be more play based as well. And I think depending on their abilities. So I kind of start with always background information of their like medical history, birth history, that kind of stuff. And then we do play based. So like I want to know how they interact in different settings. So one would be like in conversation. So how do they communicate in just like a typical conversation? And then we do play. So then if it's structured, unstructured play, so how do they communicate in those settings? Like what is their vocabulary like? How
Right.
long are they communicating in like sentences? And then how much their family or communication partners are understanding them. So that's another part as well. With older children, as they start to read and learn how to write, I definitely have some like language and like reading components. So like knowing letter sounds, letter names, spelling, that kind of stuff. So it really depends on the age of the child and also what the primary goal of the family is. Because it can be, like I said, it's in different settings, right? So if the setting is at school, it might be different. Setting is at daycare, different. Or like I only see them maybe for 12 sessions, that kind of thing. So we kind of want to work on a specific goal. So I think a big part of that is really like thinking about what the priority of the family is. And sometimes I find too that there's so many areas to work on. And it's also difficult for families to kind of target which one to do first, right? So I think part of that is figuring out how do we get most success with some of the goals so that they feel like they are improving in some sort of way.
Okay.
And then we can target other ones. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. Like it really varies from child to child for sure.
Yeah.
So how do you stay current with research and the best practices?
This is actually very interesting to me. So like, I love that you are all in early childhood education because prior to doing my master's, I was actually an early childhood educator as well as I was completing my bachelor in psychology.
Interesting.
And something that was really important for me was doing evidence-based practice as well. So it was really hard to find research, like if you're not involved in university, that kind of stuff. So once I was done, I was just like, you get the feeling that you're kind of left to your own devices. I think that happens more so now as well. However, I think we do have like in my regulatory college and also our association. So my college is called AXLPA. So that's how we become regulated as SLPs. And then there's also association, which is speech language and audiology Canada, which is SAC. So I can get certified through there. But I think yearly, and I think for SAC, it's like every couple of years. For you to be certified, you need to complete certain number of continuing education credits. So I think for me, it's good accountability to always keep myself. And I think outside of that too, like I've always been very curious if what I'm doing is still like appropriate because we know that research and evidence always like changes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we always have to adapt to it. So I think like it's either if I have maybe I would consider like a more challenging case, I either talk to my other colleagues to see if they're like, what are their experiences, but also actually like look for articles about it. I recently went to a conference as well. So I think that's another area of like continuing development that's
Yeah,
been
for
helpful.
sure.
And I didn't even think about this too, but like I know that you get continuing education credits if you take students. So I've been
Oh, okay.
supervising students for 2 years now, I want to say. So I think that's also been
Nice.
helping me in terms of just like, okay, like what are they learning in school, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think as an SLP too, I think the job really just like necessitates you to always be research evidence and
Yeah.
research backed and evidence based because like any decision always is impacting a person, right?
Oh,
So
100%. Yeah.
yeah,
So, by 19 to 24 months, a child should use and understand at least 50 different words for food, toys, animals. Even though they may not all be clear, should parents be concerned at 24 months if they haven't hit that 50 word mark?
this is a good question. And I think too, it really depends. I mean, overall, there's like the milestones for different ages. I want to say too, like, if I don't know if you've heard of Talkbox Alberta as a
No.
resource. Yeah, so for it's actually a parent focused like handout of milestones from it's been a while, it's been here for a while, so I can send you the link as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank
um
you.
but for every year or a few months, like there's milestones on language and speech, that kind of thing. So I think like the question here, like if we don't hit the 50 word mark, I think we have to keep in mind that every child is different.
Yeah.
So when we think about like 50 word mark, it's mostly an average. When we look at actual research of a lot of children, it's really a range. Like within like that 24-month period, there's kind of just that like boost of like vocabulary spurt. I think like it's one aspect, but I think it's also important to look at like how are they communicating with you? Are you
Hmm.
understanding any at all what they're saying? Like, are they engaging in back and forth interactions with you? Are they mostly just like guiding you where they want to go, that kind of thing?
Right.
So I think like there are other probably like indications of potential like language delays that could tell, but one of them could be like that, but I'm not going to say that that's for sure it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
still one of the things to look for.
You know, I remember being a young mother and my
Mm-hmm.
son, he wasn't talking and he was around 24 months and he would lead me by my hand or point to things. And so we ended up getting a referral through Alberta Health Services and went to a speech language pathologist. And then he went on to go to Renfrew. And although he just didn't really talk very much, but he's 21 now and he's gone through school. He got honor roll. He's graduated. Like he's done amazing, but he just doesn't like to talk to people.
Yeah.
Like he
Yeah.
talks, but I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's just like, he just prefers just to not talk to people. So yeah, it's interesting how that
That's
works out.
That's awesome. And I think maybe your child is also an example of, for example, when you catch it early, then you receive intervention and then you see them resolve from those language delays, right? So there are definitely children who benefit from early intervention for sure. So
Oh,
as early as you
absolutely.
can, that's like the answer. And often, I think a lot of SLPs agree with me on this, is that whenever we hear parents go to their pediatrician, often they will say, let's just wait and see. We don't like
Yeah.
the word wait and see because often, especially in the context of Alberta right now, where services are really hard in the public setting, lots of things take time. So I think like the sooner that we like maybe think that there might be something wrong, and there might not be at all, right? But
Yeah.
I think what's most important is we kind of just like follow through with those milestones and just keep in check and seek services like when we need to. And like I said, like children, like some of them and would benefit just from a little bit intervention, then they're going to be great, right? So
Yeah.
identification is really important for sure.
So then what are some early signs of speech and language delays that parents should watch for?
I think I think like that is one. So, and this is something that I guess like I'm gonna target it from a perspective of what services they can access, right? So at what ages. So
Okay.
typically before a child turns like 2 years, 8 months, they can access public services through Alberta Health for like any speech or language difficulties.
Right.
So then what that means is that if you notice that your child isn't communicating as much with language, also it kind of sometimes starts too with, so when I have like history of children, like do they have, maybe there were birth complications as well. Hearing is also one. So like you notice that they were babbling at the start and then all of a sudden they stop babbling, that kind of thing, or stop communicating after a little bit. I think those kinds of are signs that I would be looking for. The other piece is if, for example, because parents come to us before preschool saying that their child is exhibiting behavior difficulties, so that resorting to like hitting when they're not able to communicate their needs. So it often comes out as just like body like movements or
exactly.
behaviors, right? So
Yeah.
communication is behavior in a way, or behavior is communication, I should say. So I think like early on, that's what we kind of see around preschool age. And then it could look different once they hit like preschool or kindergarten as well too.
So what are some of the common sounds that toddlers seem to struggle with these days?
I think like the common thing that people think about when they hear speech sound concerns is the lisps, so S's. Some children also have difficulties with their R's. So actually there's this new, it was done in 2018, but it's a study across 27 different languages. And basically they're trying to get like what is typical for the sounds that are mastered per age level. And so like, I want to say like for 2 to 3 years old, most of like the earlier developing sounds should be there. And then for preschool age, so for kind of 4 to 5, we want them to be able to pretty much like say most of the sounds in English language, with the exception of THs and Rs. THs and Rs are the hardest to master, but based on like studies, like TH should be acquired by age like 6. You might hear a child at 2 years old have S like that sound, but that is not mastered until about 4 years old. So then like really thinking about at what age these sounds are mastered, and then where your child is at, and be like, hey, like if by like 4 years old my child is saying my child is still saying tat for cat, for example, then that could be something that we need to remediate, because like the K's and the G's are mastered around like 2 to 3 years of age, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can send that like link to you as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. We can put it in the show notes as well so that parents can get it.
For sure.
I know that I didn't master the TH sound for, it was well over 6. Glad to know though, at least that, because my parents used to always complain that it took me forever. And I'm sure they were like pushing me before 6. So now I know it was not my fault.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm just like, I have families where their children are 4 years of age, and then they're just like, well, they can't say their R's yet. And I'm just like, hey, like need to give it time to.
Yeah.
But it's always just good to, like I said, to look at like time points and see where your child is at. The other thing that I wanted to mention is like how much a child is able to be understood. For example, just like conversation with somebody that's not familiar. We used to think that by like age 3 or 4, they should be understood like 70 to 90% of the time by everybody. But
Okay.
it's actually less than that. So I think like around 4 to 5 is when 50% of what people are saying are understood by non-familiar listeners.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah. So I just want to make sure that I get this right too. Yeah, so 4 years it has to be 50%, 5 years, 75%. And so like, for example, if a parent is saying, like if they're four, for example, I only understand 50% of what they're saying, then that I'm a little worried because
Right.
for a familiar adult, like around 4 years old, like pretty much you should understand most of what they're saying. So
Yeah.
I think that's the other piece. And some kiddos too are very interesting because like when they say words by themselves, you can understand it, but once they put it in sentences and in conversation, you're just like, what is happening? I can't understand what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's funny that you say that. I had a little one a few years ago, and I understood way more than what even their parents understood. And I always assumed it was because they spent 10 hours a day, 5 days a week with
Mhm.
me. So I'm like, of
Yeah.
course I understand it. And I
Yeah.
maybe sometimes parents they don't take the time to slow down and listen to what they're saying. That, like that's my job, so I have all day to listen to what they're
Exactly.
trying to tell me. But maybe sometimes parents need to just slow down a little bit and not rush the kid along, right?
Yeah.
Because that makes it, then they get nervous and then they're trying to say it, but they're trying to hurry up and it makes it more difficult. So I think sometimes you
Mhm.
just need to slow down, like parents, slow down, let them get it out.
Don't ask too many questions,
Right?
parents. Yes.
Let them answer one before you move on to the next.
Exactly.
So I know we touched on this a little bit, but we've all heard kids that have cute little speech errors, like Paschetti for spaghetti, twee or fee for three, but usually they grow out of it. It seems fairly common for little kids to struggle with forming certain sounds. How do parents and caregivers determine if a child may need some help?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like when they have words like Paschetti or something like that, or three or twee for three, maybe my perspective is different because I also think of like how many sounds are they combining in one speech production. So, for example, if I say the word mat, it's easier to say than the word three, just because there's like consonant, vowel, consonant,
Yeah.
and all of those sounds are earlier developing sounds, whereas the th are the three, and then in a blend, it's harder to
Yeah.
acquire those sounds. So I think part of that is really, I think like once you kind of know at what age children are expected to be doing a certain like sound or have mastered a sound, and if they're not meeting that kind of milestone, then I think that's kind of a flag to like say, hey, like maybe this is time for somebody to intervene or just have a check. And there are times that children just really need like that time to really master the words, especially longer, like multiple syllable words as well, too.
Yeah.
It's just like one or two words in their vocabulary that sound kind of funny, then I'm just like, hey, like maybe it's not a speech thing versus like I'm really, even as for example a parent, like I can only understand what he's saying like 50% of the time or even
Yeah.
less. Then that's something that is like maybe like not alarming, but it could be a cause for concern if you're
Right.
not understanding your child. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're not going to be 15 years old walking around saying Paschetti
Exactly.
or I'm
Exactly.
20 free, right?
Exactly.
I mean, so that just give them time, it'll come, right? We don't
Yeah.
need to panic. Yeah.
So I have had kids in my care who almost have like their own language. The words are like really similar to the real word, but not quite the same. Is that pretty typical with toddlers, or is that something?
Yeah, I think again the context is like very important. So they're kind of like developmental like trajectory. So making what we call like approximations of words or proto words.
Yeah,
So before children start making actual words, there's a period where they might kind of imitate words, but they're not actual words.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think like it's part of the developmental trajectory of just like imitating the cues of the language, like the prosody of the language. So how we communicate,
Yeah.
where are our pauses, that kind of thing. I think that's like part of just like language development. It's just figuring those pieces out until we kind of have the actual words for certain things. It's part, I will say that it is part of like typical development, but there's also children who have language delays that maybe they're much older, but they're still in that phase. So I think the question is like, how do you get them to the next stage? And then that might
Right.
be something that if they're older, then that is a question. Do we need a speech evaluation or a language evaluation for that? So
Yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah,
makes sense. I have a
yeah.
little one at the moment that, so when my dogs are barking, I shout, I'm like, knock it off, is what I
Mhm,
shout to them. And
mhm,
this little 1-year-old will copy me, but she goes, naka naka. It's the
mhm.
cutest thing.
I love that. So yeah,
It's
they're
so cute.
basically imitating like how you're saying it, but they just don't have like the
Yeah,
word or sorry, the sound and syllable inventory for it just yet. And that's
exactly.
totally fine. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I always think it's the cutest thing when she does it.
it's so cute. Yeah.
So, as caregivers or parents, how can we support our child's speech and language development at home?
Big question. Number one, I think now is the screen time. So I think I know that parents can be busy and then it's easy to resort to children having screen times and you just got to do what you got to do. But I think it's very important because there is like a lot of new research coming in about screen time and how it affects brain development. So right now, the Canadian Pediatric Society is recommending like zero screen time before the age of 2, so 0 to 2 years old. And then I think like a limited amount of time for a period after that. The many families that I see, especially children who might be diagnosed with autism spectrum or have been diagnosed with autism spectrum, I've had comments like, oh, they learned speaking through watching TV shows or something like that. But research actually shows that children learn better when they're communicating face to face with an adult. And then there was research, I think back in 2003, where they compared how babies and toddlers prefer like either people's faces on the TV or like live faces. And what they found was that the babies and toddlers actually look at the real life face more often than like the ones in the TV show. So as
Right.
much as we love Miss Rachel, I think it's very important to not replace real life interactions with screen time. That's the one
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And then I think the other one is I don't know if you've heard of the term serve and return.
No.
No.
Maybe no. Yeah. So it's a pop. So we call it differently in our field, but I think in the field of psychology, serve and return is when it's basically like back and forth interaction. So when I say pika pika and then they say boo. So that's
Okay.
I'm serving something and then they're returning the
Right.
interaction to me. So then
Okay.
if I said something like, do you want more? That's a serve. And then if the child says this or like says this or says more, then that's a return. So I
Okay.
think like the more back and forth or serve and return interactions you have in a day with a child, that really helps build like they're wanting to communicate with you because when you try to give them a language opportunity like that, even if they can't say the word out loud, if you know that they really want it, they're going to
Yeah.
show it, like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think like serve and return is very important for children, especially like toddler, like baby and toddler ages. And then the other one is recasting. So recasting means, like, for example, if maybe the child said basketti or something like that, then I
Yeah.
would say, oh, you mean the spaghetti. So then you're kind of like giving them feedback, but you're saying it the right way than what they
Yeah.
than what they said. So kind of correcting it, but not like saying, oh, you need to say this with me. Let's say it together, spaghetti. So that's
Right.
different. So that's what's recasting. So for example, there are children like preschool age that might say, him did this. So then I would say something like, he did this.
Yeah.
He was the one who did it. So then kind of like restating what they've said, but saying it in a more grammatically correct sentence is really good feedback for children as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think those are a few things to think about. And of course, like reading every single day to your children, reading with them is super important too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you tailor therapy for different learning styles or neurodiversity? Example, autism, ADHD.
That's also a good question. I think like for neurodiverse students or children, it's becoming a thing in early childhood as well. Just the tiers of support,
Yeah.
where there's like universal support, and one of them is the use of visuals, right? So I think like it all starts with the idea that, for example, if we provide visuals, that's a form of universal support, not only for children who have ADHD, who have autism, but also for children who are neurotypical, but maybe like during times of dysregulation, it's really hard for them to really like access their, like other parts of their brain. So I think it all starts with accessing those and having available those universal supports for these students. And then from there, I think, again, it really depends on the goals. But in a typical session, for example, with a child with autism, I'd always have my visual schedule ready. And then if a child is non-speaking or still learning how to speak, then I always would have a core board. I don't know if you've guys seen a core board before, but it's basically just this one like letter size like page, and then it has it really depends on which SLP you work with, but basically the whole thing is that you have the pictures of the 50 most common words in the English language. So then you have words like go, more, want, that kind of thing.
So sort of like PECS.
Yeah,
almost.
So like I think PECS is a communication system, but where it's like different is that it always only goes to a certain step. Whereas like a full communication system would involve like more vocabulary and different ways of communicating. Because I think PECS is you just really like tell the person you want something. So it's more just requesting. But communication is more than just requesting, right? So like it's one thing to say, I want this, but it's also one thing to say, no, I don't want to do that right now. I want to do this. So I think that's something that we always think about when we're thinking about communication goals. So for children with limited vocabulary, we want to give them or teach them the words that commonly occur in a language. So actually for children with autism, they're really good at acquiring like all of the names of things, like even dinosaurs, even planets, like they all know, like there's so many different like special interests. But where they lack, or maybe where their challenges are, is like really building those sentences together to be able to produce and communicate with other people. And that's why we have those like core boards, so that I know, like, because I know that children can say water, for example, but it's another thing to teach them to say, I want water now or something. I don't want water. So really building the language from like word per word. And then I think also like their script of learning. So for example, script of learning is essentially like, are they able to watch my mouth and imitate what I'm saying? Sometimes children don't have that yet, and that's totally fine. So
Okay.
I think like that's why we always like, for me, a big part of my therapy is play-based and really child-led, because I think we get the quickest success when we do child-led activities together. And then when they feel more comfortable because we're in their world, then we can kind of build that interaction of just like, hey, when I say something, this is what happens. Or when I
Yeah.
say something and you say the same thing, something happens. And then it becomes like this back and forth interaction. And then we can kind of slowly move towards more structured activities. And then that's where I kind of, with those visuals, I do start like having, okay, now we can have a schedule of like, first we do this and then we do this.
Yeah.
Or like, first we do this for like 2 minutes and then we do this, we have a break or something like that. So depending on the child, sometimes they might just like pace around everywhere and you just follow their lead the full hour. Or sometimes the child can do some focused like work or have back and forth for like 10-15 minutes. I'm like, that's a win. Then let's take a break. So really like using visuals, like schedules, and also like timers and breaks in between, and also just like sensory tools as well. So I do have some contracts that I work with occupational therapists, and I just love it because I think like when we collaborate more with them, it's easier to practice all of those goals together in one and make the child like ready for learning. Because if they're not ready for learning, then because they're not regulated, then it's going to be hard to learn anything, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So how long does speech therapy usually take to see some progress?
So for speech sound, just learning the speech sounds, it's so funny because when I was in grad school, I always said, why do everybody say like it always depends on the child? And then now I'm like, it actually really depends on the child. So a typical treatment block for me would be like anywhere from like 10 to 12 sessions.
Okay.
And so like, and there's many levels of speech sounds as well. Some children, they learn really fast.
Yeah.
Because maybe like there's also, it really depends, because there's some children who have difficulty like producing the sounds with their mouth system or their brain coordinating their mouth. So those ones take longer and you need breaks in between. Whereas there are children who like in their brain, they already have the sound, but because they just learned it differently or they just misheard it differently, you're just breaking that pattern, and then they learn it like in 6 or 7 sessions.
Okay.
So I think like it really depends on the child. And sometimes too, like I think maturity can be a pro and a con. So pro in that if a child, like for example, grade 1, we're learning R and they have no other difficulties and they're like quick at learning, then it's easier to remediate. Whereas like if they're in grade 5 and they still have difficulties with R, then that takes longer because you're undoing years of habits, right? So
yeah, exactly.
it really depends on the child too, but like what the cause of their speech difficulty is. In terms of language therapy, once children get into preschool, so I've been in PUF programs. So some children, they receive a full year of PUF and then they've resolved. Some require 2 years, then they've resolved. Where some children still continue to have difficulties past the 2 years and eventually leading to reading literacy difficulties. So they might always need some support in some way, and they might be like doing really amazing, and they might not need it in some grades, but there might be like different, I guess, challenges in school that then make it harder for them to learn. So I think the key thing for those children is to have continuous access to support when they need it too. So
yeah.
Okay. Could you touch base a bit on the difference between articulation and language delays?
Articulation, speech sounds are like pretty much like the same area together. So articulation, speech sounds are how we produce the sounds in our mouth, or how, so when we think about the sounds and then how we produce them, that's like articulation. Whereas language delays are more, it's more involved with knowing like the vocabulary. So how many words do you know? How many different words do you know? Also formulating sentences, like how long your sentences are, how specific your sentences are, how specific your stories are. And also like, are you able to share that information in a dialogue with another person? And are you able to use, so as you grow older, are you able to use more specific vocabulary? So like when I think about angry, am I able to use the word furious sometimes? Can I use the word irate sometimes to differentiate my feeling in that moment?
Right.
So yeah, that is more like language. And then the other one, the speech sounds are more that like articulation piece. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How do you do like with the sleep consultant? She has like a package that has like 2 weeks at a time. How do you guys work it? That
Oh,
you
for home practice?
Yeah.
So I think so. This is a good question too, because like when we talked about cultural considerations, every family is different. So what I do say with family is that yes, you get improvement from being in speech therapy every week, but some families who really want to extend that practice at home have even more improvements. So I will offer, depends. So if a family is just like, hey, tell me what to do, coach me on how to do it, practice this at home, yes, I will give packets. Whereas there are some families that are so busy that getting in even 5 minutes is really challenging, then that's a different thing. And I'm not going to say like they're doing bad, like the children are still progressing. But I do say that upfront that when you are putting in the practice outside, then you can see progress quickly.
Right.
So, yeah.
Does it help or hinder a child's language development when they are exposed to different languages and accents at an early age?
This is a really good question. So there are many families, immigrant families, who speak to their children in their home languages. And then at some point, they got an advice saying, hey, like you need to communicate in English so that your child learns English. But that's actually not a good recommendation because that's against like research findings. So what research is actually saying is for your child to really learn a language, and they're going to learn English because, like, for example, yes, they're learning maybe Tagalog at home. They're still being exposed to maybe when they go to daycare, day home, or the school in English, which is like most of the time they're going to learn English there. But what research is saying is that the parents should be talking in a language that they feel the most comfortable in, because that's how they are receiving the best language input towards their children. So I think like many parents can be scared that their child is not ready, but actually it's very important for them to really talk in the language that they feel most comfortable in to their child for them to learn. And children catch on really quickly. So then, for example, there is research for in terms of like birth order and how a child is like more fluent or more proficient in English versus their home language. So like if you're the eldest, you're most proficient in your home language than maybe the second child or the third child, just because you are speaking, you're getting exposed to more of your home language at home versus when you have a sibling, you both kind of know that everybody's talking in English anyway, so you talk to each other in English.
Right.
So there's differences in proficiencies of like home languages, but I don't like, I think it's very important that whoever is communicating with them is speaking the language that they feel most comfortable in communicating.
Okay. Yeah, I always worry. I'm from England, and there's certain
Mhm.
words that I just can't say with a Canadian accent. So I just say them with my English accent, and then the kids, I don't know, sometimes they're good with it, and sometimes they're like, I don't know what that is. So I'm always worried,
Oh,
but I always worried that I'm gonna like mess them up because they'll say
no.
some of them will say the certain like water. Some of the
Yeah.
kids will actually say it like that
Yeah.
as well, and I'm like, oh no.
I think there's a point where they realize that one word can sound many different things depending on who's thinking about it, but they're still able to like determine that. For children who are exposed to by two languages or more than two languages, actually, that what do you call it? That flexibility. I can't remember what the term is, but like there's that flexibility that a certain object can have many different names.
Oh, okay.
They acquire like bilingual, multilingual children actually acquire that earlier
Oh,
than like
nice.
just like one language kids as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
So I have a feeling I know how you're going to answer this next question. But
Ooh.
what would you say impacts a child's speech development the most? I could be wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the number. I think for the generation nowadays, definitely screen time is a big thing for sure. And not just for speech development, but more so that socialization piece. It's really hard because, like, socialization, especially for Gen Z, Gen A, is more online too. So
Yeah.
then you're just like, well, do we teach them early? But, like, there is research saying that screen time does alter brain development in a specific way. So the more that we kind of move away from like real interactions, then we're kind of rewiring our brain in a different.
okay. So my kids, I have three boys, 21, 19, and 15, and they are gamers, big time gamers. Very antisocial. They don't like to socialize or speak to other people, but they are smart as whips and they can type faster than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And their spelling is on point. And right. So, I mean, it's done for them. I don't know. I think it's done some good things. But
Yeah,
then I really notice that antisocial part where they have their online friends, but then in real life, that social aspect just is not there, right?
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I have a sister who's like 8 years younger than I am, and it's so interesting how she also has lots of online friends. But then when I ask her, like, "Are you hanging out with so and so?" and then she's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna play games with them or something like that." And it's also interesting. I went to a wedding, and it was one of my friend's younger siblings, and all of like my age and older ages, we were all dancing, but all of the Gen Z kiddos are just like sitting down and just like,
Yeah.
I don't know, chilling and I'm on their phones and I'm just like, this is not fun, guys. Like
Right?
you need to be like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a different kind of like social interaction for sure. And I think like, yes, like technology is super important and we need to learn it. I think we have to be where there has to be caution is when they're in that like critical development years where they're like formulating those like brain regions, like acquiring language, reading, writing skills, that kind, and socialization skills. Like we have to really be more intentional and use it with caution
Yeah.
too. So then I mean, like even for me, like there are some times that I lean on to using some like Spotify songs or whatever, or like we dance with our YouTube videos or whatever, because that's the interest of the child, but that's not like the end all be all. Like
Yeah.
really the goal is like real life communication with another person. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there any connection between speech delay and other learning disabilities?
That's a great question. So speech delay, like we'll use more broadly like speech or language. So learning disabilities like for reading, writing. So I don't know if psychologists use the term dyslexia in Alberta, but some provinces do. I'll call it dyslexia. So a reading difficulty as dyslexia. So we know dyslexia, like even like with the media, right? It's very popular. And I think 7 to 16% of the population have dyslexia. And what we are learning is that half of the children who have dyslexia actually have a language disorder as well.
Oh, interesting.
But it's often underdiagnosed than dyslexia. So there are some kids who just have a language disorder, but not like reading difficulties, or like just have speech sound errors, but that doesn't affect their reading at all. But there's a proportion of kids who actually have a harder time acquiring reading and writing skills, because like when we learn how to read, we have to map it in our brain that a certain sound is attached to a letter, right?
Yeah.
So for some kids who have speech sound difficulties, that connection is already weaker because they don't have that like phonological or that sound like understanding in their brains yet.
Right.
And then that other piece is the language. So that like, do they have that like knowledge that words are made out of sounds, and then when put them together they have meaning, that kind of thing. So definitely it's always important for us to monitor kids even if they have resolved their language difficulties or speech difficulties earlier on, because there are definitely some students who maybe later on grade 4 grade 6, as school becomes harder, it still comes up as different concern, as like reading difficulties or even behavior difficulties.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because people don't think about it as they go to junior high or high school. But like when I talk to in the schools, when I talk about history of these students, you learn that when they were maybe in like preschool or grade 1 or even earlier than that, they received speech therapy or they had earlier language difficulties. So I think like it's very important to monitor children. And that's not to say that they're not getting better. Like definitely some of them are. It's just that when things are harder, then it might reappear in different ways too. So it's continuous access is very important for these kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know screen time is not preferred, but back in the day we had Teletubbies, then there was Pingu and Shaun the Sheep and the Oddbods. They are all non-dialogue kids shows. Is there any benefit to children watching shows without dialogue?
I mean, like, maybe I will say this more broadly for like watching TV shows. I know I don't know which occupational therapist it is, but they were saying that it depends what kind of show you're watching as well, because we have shows like Coco Melon, right? There's like limited dialogue as well, but it's super, in terms of intensity of color, it's so bright.
Yeah.
And so shows like that, I can't remember what the term is, like fast, like these are fast shows, and then they have like really high intensity color shows. Those are actually not great for children because it's almost just like a constant dopamine hit for them, because it's just like super stimulating every couple seconds or whatever. Whereas shows like Bluey, they have a more kind of slow down and not as intense colors. So then those are shows that children can watch or something like that. I think like with all of these, because I love Teletubbies too, and Shaun the Sheep, they were really funny. And I think like there's always use in terms of like understanding, like making inferences, right? So like Shaun the Sheep does something and something happens and you're just like left to your own devices, like kind of predicting why that happened, that kind of thing. So I think it's important. And I've actually, for older children, I've showed wordless stories, like Simon the Cat on YouTube. And then I've have them like tell what happened to me because there's no words at all. They just really need to watch what is happening. So for
Right.
sequencing and storytelling, those are really good things. I think like at the end of the day, when they're watching shows, really moderation. So like, are they receiving that screen time the full day, or just like there's a certain time of the day that they are receiving it, and then they
Yeah.
still get interaction from other people during the rest of the day? I think that's where I like
Oh,
would
for
go, I
sure.
think. Yeah.
Many children seem to go through a stuttering stage at some point. What are some ways to help them with that?
So there is there is a developmental trajectory part sometimes for children where they acquire so much vocabulary and like grammar all at once, where we see like that stuttering, or we call it disfluencies, that they can't formulate like fast enough
Yeah.
those like sentences, and that's totally fine. Where like if we see it more happen like by the age of 4 or something like that, then that might be something that I'm worried about. Or there's like different disfluencies that are happening every minute, that kind of thing, then that might be cause for concern. But like I think overall, like for that period where you notice that children are struggling, the best part is really just to get them to slow down. I can't remember who said slow down earlier, but that was it. Like really,
Yeah.
you gotta get them to just like pause, and then let's breathe, and then let's slow down again. And
Yeah.
I think that also is important on the adults part. So whenever you're communicating with them, my quick strategy for adults is to use an easy start. So when we talk, usually just talk like this, or when I said something like or, that's a hard start. So I would say something like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. So it's gonna sound slower, but it's
Yeah.
called an easy onset. So you're kind of just like slowing down your voice so that they have time to process, something like that. So that's called
Right.
an easy onset, just so that you're modeling just that calm voice when you're talking to them, so that they
Yeah.
also catch on to that. Because that's the other part, is just like when we also adjust the way that we talk, then children also tend to imitate that as well. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with speech therapy is when I try to do all of these strategies, the children does it, they do it as well. And then passing that on to their caregiver, their parents, and having to practice at home is
Right.
like very important. So
What are some things parents can do early on to help their child's speech progression?
that is continuing the serve and return,
Right.
and modeling. So, for example, you want to challenge the child maybe at a level that's a bit like higher than them, but not too high. For example, the child says one word. So, like water, walk, eat, something like that. So, you know that they're saying one word. So then I'm going to be like, hey, like, I know you can say one word. Maybe let's add in a word: more water, more apple, or something like that. So like that's kind of the same progression. So like if you know that they're saying 2 words, maybe let's start go eat what? Go eat cereal, or go eat banana, or something like that. So like I think part of this too is listening to the communication attempts of your child, and then kind of mimicking that, but also like building the structure from there.
Right.
So kind of like adding in one more step, but not two. So then, for example, if a child is saying more water, I'm not going to tell them, can you say, can I have more water, please? So, because you're jumping from like 2 word combinations all the way to 6 words.
Right.
So that's something to like think about, because I know some parents also want to be like child to be well mannered. I'm like, you can still be well mannered and use like something that's appropriate for their age at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not to say that some children, like there are 2-year-olds that are just like communicating like in 5 or 6 or word sentences. And that's like, but it's really like when you're in front of a child, it's just like, I wonder how many word combinations you're using right now.
Yeah.
can I build on from that? So yeah.
How does the baby talk kids do while playing affect a child's speech development?
But what
Um,
about when the kids are doing the baby talk? Like when it's 3 and
okay.
4-year-olds that are like pretending that, they're doing the little
Uh,
baby talk, other than the fact that it drives me batshit.
Yeah.
But does it hurt their
um,
development? Because I mean, it hurts. It seriously makes my ears want to bleed. It just drives me so crazy.
I
It's when they
think,
start crying like babies too, and you're like, "What's wrong?" And they're
mm,
like, "No, nothing. I'm playing babies."
Yeah, and they're
oh
like,
my God.
yeah, I can't even do it how they it just it drives me nuts. And I'm like, but it doesn't help like the other kids. So I'm always like, no, we don't need
Yeah,
to stop baby talk. But I don't know if
yeah.
it's just me that it's driving me crazy or if it actually hinders the other kids.
Oh, for sure. I think like, I mean, they are just maybe like one child out of the full context. But I think in terms of baby talk, I think it can be a good conversation for the child to learn different contexts in which we use different voices, right? So like
Yeah,
here's like, oh, I'm playing with babies. Oh, so I can say something like, I notice you're playing with babies. You can use baby talk with
right.
babies. But when we're talking, I want to hear your voice.
Yeah,
So I think like the more facilitation of just like this, it's just like bathroom talk. Like
yeah,
if I hear one more bathroom talk, like from like
right.
a
Yep.
preschool kid, I'm just like, okay, we're going to use that in this context. And then teaching them and facilitating that is very important because then they can also learn rules of the language, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
How do you make therapy sessions engaging and age appropriate?
I guess short answer is like really looking at the child's interests and doing child-led therapy first and foremost. I also try to incorporate a lot of games too. So it depends. Like if they're able to do back and forth, like in terms of games that I play like board games or like Spot It, because especially for children, like they already know. And it's so interesting because children already can be aware of others, like, oh, I don't sound like them, or I am not able to read or communicate like them. So, like, this is like speech or communication can be an area that they don't feel confident towards. So, when I do therapy, it's mostly like, I want you to have a positive interaction when we're doing this because I'm making your brain work hard. So, I'm just going to make your brain work hard when you're ready to learn, right? Not when you're just like, oh, I don't want to do this. So, I think a lot of it is incorporating games and what they like for sure.
Do you offer teletherapy and how effective is it?
I know some SLPs do. I prefer in-person therapy nowadays. Like back in like during COVID and the lockdown, I did offer teletherapy and there were a few instances that I was seeing children in rural areas. So I think it was just easier to access through teletherapy as well. It does require more work just because you want the child to be completely engaged for that like 45 minutes to an hour, right?
Yeah.
Imagine that's
And
hard.
and then the other part is like it depends on their video quality or my video quality as well. So if we're working on speech sounds, I'm like I can't see what's happening inside that mouth. So
Yeah, exactly.
so
Like,
exactly. And sometimes parents aren't even there and then I'm just like, "Oh no, like your face is not even in the camera." So I think those are just really tricky. But I've seen it work in some families where the child is there and the parent is there and the parent is more involved. So that the parent is telling me, okay, are they making this sound in their like in this tongue placement or whatever? Then I'm just like, hey, that's really good. And they are a good fit for teletherapy. But for children, for example, who are non-speaking, I'm just like, I can't get this child engaged. Like,
Yeah.
and if you're working on back and forth interaction, I think in person is like my favorite too. And you just don't like, I mean, we talk about this social interaction thing, right? Like It's
Yeah.
just not the same as in person.
Oh,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Okay, so if someone thinks their child has a speech delay, would they get in touch with you directly or do they need a referral from their doctor?
you don't need a referral from your doctor. The other thing that I will share to you is the intake line for AHS pediatric rehab services. I believe it's all of Alberta.
Okay.
So anytime you have any speech or language concerns, you can just call that intake line and then they connect you for that. And something to mention too is here, like speech delays also can come from hearing difficulties.
Right.
So yes, we haven't talked, but I wanted to mention that is like if your child stops babbling or stops talking at some point, I think always my first question is their hearing okay? And
Yeah.
you can access hearing services through the rehab services intake line as well. And then I always tell parents, like, if you have private health insurance coverage, then you can connect with me. I will also send you a link to the Alberta Association for Private Practitioners so that
Okay.
you can look at your area and then maybe you're in like Airdrie or something. And then if you check that location, it's going to show you all of the SLPs in that area that service
Right.
that location. And then the other piece is super important, I think, for day homes and daycares as well, is it's always a good idea to be in contact maybe with like an agency or an SLP just for, like regular monitoring or screening if you have like questions about certain children or like if the parents don't know where to go. The other big point of contact is the school board near you. Program unit funding starts at 2 years, 8 months. So if
Okay.
you're seeing any like difficulties around two-ish years old, it would be a good time to contact the school board for that. But I will say though, like you will need a referral from a doctor if you're wondering about autism, so other like neurodevelopmental conditions.
Yeah.
And I think the big part is really like some families don't even know until the child is like in kindergarten, and the Glen Rose wait list right now is like 2 years,
Yeah.
and FSCD for special services is another 2 years, and this is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
So I think like the quicker that we catch or maybe just like have signs for autism or traits of autism, even if it comes out as not, I think it's always good to connect with your pediatrician and or doctor and then start a referral so
Yeah.
that they can be in the wait list as
Okay.
early as before 2 years old. So, and just that's just because of the context of Alberta, which is like unfortunate. Like all these children need support right away. But
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more, what do you call this, awareness. And it's so frustrating that it's not a common knowledge among parents as well, that is something to keep
Oh,
an
for
eye
sure.
on. For
And
sure.
there's still a
Yeah,
stigma with things like autism and ADHD, right? Like parents
exactly.
are very quick to say, oh, no, 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 they're fine, or they're just a boy doing boy
Yes,
things, or just, whatever. And it's like, if there is extra help out there, why wouldn't them to have it, right? So, yeah,
exactly. I think that's it, the support system too. And like, I get that families go through phases, right, of their journey of understanding, but
yeah,
it's the services that children can access that is so important. And
yeah,
it's more time sensitive, I guess.
yeah. Oh, exactly. Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. We appreciate all your knowledge
Sure.
and answering all our questions.
Yes.
Okay. And then if you could, any links you want to send me, I will make sure they're in with the show notes and we'll put them on our socials as well. So,
Beautiful. That's so awesome. Thank you. This was amazing. Will it be on Spotify? Is that,
yes,
yes.
it'll be
Ah,
everywhere that podcasts are
that's
available. So,
awesome. Oh,
iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Castbox. I can't
that's
think of all the other ones,
amazing.
but yeah.
Okay, I gotta have a listen to your other episodes, but this is so great. I think this was very helpful, like not only for parents, but other like early childhood educators as well. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay,
That's it for Day Home Divas this week.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Day Home Divas, on TikTok at Day Home Divas, and join our Facebook group at Day Home Divas.
If anyone has any topics you want us to cover, or if you have any questions or suggestions, you can email us at dayhomedivas@gmail.com or submit through our website, dayhomedivas.com.
We would also appreciate it if you could rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. It really helps the podcast move up their charts so it gets more exposure. Hope you join us again next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.